as of this coming week. This evening, we welcome you to an opportunity at this meet and greet to get to know Eldridge Hawkins, to help him explore as he's deciding whether or not to make a run, and to really allow him to hear and serve your ideas as a community, and to have a real exchange as he shares his vision for change in West Orange. Without further ado, Eldridge Hawkins.
Thank you, Mark, and thank everybody for coming. I definitely appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to have this exchange and this dialogue. I want to begin also by thanking the hosts or the people that sent out these lovely invitations to get you all here. Deborah Mapson is hiding in the back. Please give her a round of applause. I know that Doris Albino and Richard Rose are en route, so I definitely appreciate that. I also want to acknowledge my family, actually. My mother is standing right there, wave. Right, my father's in the back. And we even managed to get my sister here from Sea Caucus, so that's a good But definitely, some of you I know well, some of you I've only met in passing, and some of you have maybe never even met me before. So let me just start from the beginning. I was born and raised here in West Orange, initially from McClellan Park. And over the years, I went to a variety of schools, most of which were here in town. Spent some time at Redwood School, some time at St. Joseph's, and finally ended up at Seton Hall Prep. Academically, I have a bachelor's degree from Rider University in Business Administration, another undergraduate degree in Criminal Justice, and an MBA or a master's degree in Business Administration with a concentration in Management from Seton Hall University. Coming up, I ended up in Orange pretty much after I graduated college, not because I wanted to leave West Orange. I'm going to blame this one on my mother. They had a crazy idea that I should actually pay rent to stay at home. Go figure. And me being who I was, I said, well, if you're going to charge me rent, I should have some rights, right? I'm a tenant now, so I need keys to my room, and I should be able to have company. And she said, no, not in my house. So it didn't work out the way I planned. So I ended up actually looking at Orange. I found a two-family. Rented out the top, stayed on the bottom. It was right on Nassau Street in the valley, snowball's throw from West Orange. And that was actually my first property. Along the way, or shortly, or actually before moving to Orange, I became an auxiliary police officer a couple years prior, where I volunteered my time in town, basically working free as a cop. That was one of the things that I wanted to do in life, was to give back in public service and join law enforcement. In time, I became a full-time regular police officer with the Township of West Orange, and I'm now presently a retired cop here in town. I spent some time as a realtor, investing in real estate throughout Essex County and in Trenton, getting into development. And shortly thereafter, I moved to Orange, like I said, and I actually wanted to run for city council. And mayor was not really something that was on my horizon at the time. Some people had asked me while we're mixing and mingling, how do we make that transition? Some of you may remember that the former mayor preceding me got himself in a little bit of legal trouble, which kind of opened up the field for me to transition from running for city council to mayor. With the support of the community, we actually moved forward and were successful in winning, and we did a lot of good things in town. A lot of which I think that experience can be transitioned over here to West Orange, not just because they're bordering communities, because a lot of the things that happen over there impact this city over here and vice versa. We were successful, and actually, before I forget, stand up, Valerie. This is Valerie Jackson. She is my former Director of Planning and Economic Development. And I just wanted to recognize her because it's real easy when you're the mayor and you're the one out front to say me and I, but it's important to recognize that there's people that stand with you to help you do these things and accomplish these things. So one of the things that we were successful in doing was bringing in over $100 million in outside funding to help us redevelop Orange. Some of you may have seen the old housing projects that stood on Wilson and Perot Streets along Freeway Drive East. Within the first year and a half, we demolished that, and we got it raised now with townhomes and senior apartments, et cetera, on that area. We also got about $27 million in tax credits from our Republican administration. Now, why do I say that? Because I'm a Democrat. And people wouldn't think that would mix too well, but I'm the type of elected official, where I was at least, that was focused more on the issues. What makes sense and what helps us move the city forward, irregardless of what party ideology it was from. What helps us get the city where we need to go. And because I had that type of attitude, we were successful in getting $27 million from Governor Christie to help us redevelop that site, and several other funding sources that we were able to apply to help redevelop Orange. Why do you care here? Just, I'm curious, show of hands, who's seen the big hole in the ground on Main Street? Thomas Edison Battery Factory that's been there since, I think, I might have even been patrolling the streets, I think, when they actually started digging a hole there. we have the expertise, we have the know-how, we know how to move those projects forward, and those are things that we actually have to start moving forward in order to broaden our tax base, right? Everybody's concerned about taxes going up, and at the same time, we have a lot of people that are concerned about programs that we need to expand, right? Somebody asked me about kids. What do you want to do for the kids? Somebody asked me about roads. All of these things cost money. That's the common denominator. So how do we fund these things? We do it by expanding our rateable base through redevelopment, whether that's housing, commercial, a combination thereof. Those are things that we have to look at, and the alternative revenue streams that we can bring into the municipality through grants, whether it's tax credits, whether it's CDBG funding, whether it's dollars that we get from the federal government. All of that contributes to the pot to help us move towns forward. Crime is another issue. Depending on which part of town you're from, it may be a bigger issue in one section than it is in another. But I can tell you firsthand that we had heavy crime issues in Orange. I actually had mothers or family members of murdered children sitting in my office crying. I responded to scenes at 1 o'clock in the morning where people were shot in the head and killed. You know, this was a serious issue in Orange, but we were successful in dropping crime 22%, even with all that going on in the municipality. That's, again, expertise that can be transitioned over here to help us move the township of West Orange forward. You look at the Valley. One of the things that was a priority for me when I was in Orange was helping to craft or create this arts district. Did any of you used to eat at Ricky's in the Valley years ago? Okay, so you know that that was run down and pretty much abandoned for a long time. Anybody that's been down there now knows that that is now the Hat City Kitchen. We partnered with Hands, okay? Hands is a community development corporation. They didn't do that by themselves. They had a shared vision. They partnered with the city. We helped them get outside funding from the state to leverage resources in order to move that forward. And the vision was to have a seamless transition from West Orange to Orange. So you couldn't tell where one town started or stopped because you hit a pothole or you saw an abandoned building. And I think that that's important because we have to look at our municipalities not just as separate individual islands of West Orange here and Orange there. Why? There is no imaginary boundary that says the crime can't cross from your boundary over here. Right? We're not immune just because we're in West Orange. So how do we stop that, if you want to call it urban decay, from moving further up? We have to partner with one another. We have to recognize that Orange has things like a train station right there on Highland Avenue and Scotland Road that can be utilized as an anchor to help bolster the redevelopment in the valley. Okay, and that helps us, again, broaden our rateable base and keep moving West Orange forward. So there's a lot of things that we've done. This literature that is on most of your seats outlines a lot of things that we did in the short time that we were there. I'm not going to go through it all because you guys can read, but I just want to give you a sense of some of the things that we've done and some of the expertise we have, but more so to get a sense from you what your issues, what your concerns are as we sit here and consider whether or not we want to move forward, whether running for office here makes sense. When I was approached by a lot of residents to kind of consider doing this, my response was, I'm open to it, but let's see if the support is there. Because when you've been in office long enough, you realize it's not the title or the crown that gives you power, it's your army, right? You can't press the button 1,000 times. I asked my father, who was an attorney, I said, see if you can find out a legal way I can vote for myself 3,000 times. He said, son, I can't do it. So, you know, that means that the people have to be behind you. It has to be something that makes sense. So that's why, like Mark said, I'm grateful for his introduction, that this is kind of exploratory for you guys to get a sense about me. I'm not naive. I know I've been in office a while, and people may have heard different things, whether it's in the media, whether it's in the newspaper, TV. I'm an open book. Feel free to ask me whatever question you want, as well as share with me some of your concerns and what you'd like to see me do if I did run and become the mayor of your municipality. So at this point, I guess I'll just open it up for questions and we'll just see where it goes. There's cards as well. If people want to fill that out or pass the name up, but there's only a few people here, so just go.
Is it okay that I call you Mayor Hawkins? My name is Joe Giuliano. I'm a commissioner on the Orange Housing Authority. I want to thank you for that support with Hope 6 redevelopment. And I am the Republican appointment, and you had me elected as an Essex County Democratic Committee member on your line. I want to thank you for that. And I won your district, in my district, South 5. Thank you. And I wanted to say that hope you do win in West Orange. We need that. We need leadership. The number one thing I wanted to mention, and this goes back many, many years. Your dad knew my mom. My mom was the first woman elected in Orange, and that is to blend the wards of Orange, the South Ward and the West Ward, into Orange, West Orange and South Orange, respectively, because we have the Highland train station and you know what we're talking about. We have hands, we have that area. There should be a functional transit village into West Orange with a real parking authority and a real agreement with West Orange. And I think you're the guy that can do it. And you're the guy that can make that happen.
Again, that goes back to partnerships between the municipalities. You can't look at one town as separate from the other. I've talked to Mayor Warren, who actually is the new mayor of Orange. We have a very good relationship. And should this be something that happens and works and makes sense, we've already had conversations that, there's ways that we can partner to help get those train stations where they need to be. We can partner, again, with the two communities to make the valley area or the adjoining sections of town important, whether that's through task force or otherwise, because that is absolutely critical to have that cooperation between the townships. That's all. Yeah.
Hi.
Just do me a favor, because, I didn't see the sign-in sheet. Just please say your name, and forgive me if I forget. I'm getting old. Y'all understand one thing.
No problem. I'm Deb Harvis. I've lived in West Orange for 20 years or so. And I just have just a couple of questions. I know that you said you're exploring. Exploring to run for what? You haven't really announced what you're exploring for. And I remember your accolades from when you live in Orange. My family lives in Orange, from Montague, so I'm very familiar with you and what you've been doing. But since I've been in West Orange, I really haven't heard of anything that you've done in West Orange. No Board of Ed, no council. I mean, how or why would you jump into West Orange now when there was no grassroots effort? And what is it that you're trying to jump in to do?
Well, that's a very good question. And first, let me start by saying that this idea was not one that I conceived in my mind. It was something that was brought to me by different residents, some of which are the ones that put their name on this invitation to invite you here today. And because I acknowledge some of those issues that you raised, and I'm going to address them, it was not something I wanted to throw myself into. You haven't seen an announcement because I understand that there has to be a reacquainting with the residents of this town for them to ask these types of questions so that we can go into this thing slowly and see if it's something that all of you can appreciate and move forward with. As it relates to what I've done in town, again, I grew up here, so I remember what this town was like 30 years ago. Why? I played the mountaintop soccer, right? I did the t-ball and the wrestling and all that. I tried to wrestle. It didn't work out too well. But, I participated in those types of programs. As I got a little older, again, I volunteered as a police auxiliary here in town before I became a regular officer. I was the president of the Orange Essex JCs, which actually did a lot of community service work within the county. We partnered with the West Orange First Aid Squad a couple times, actually, to give out free coats to people that were in need. I actually was the director of the Carl Lewis Fund, which actually took urban kids that may have been from different districts and helped them get trained in conflict resolution and other issues, and then placed within the St. Barnabas healthcare system and other areas. So, I have definitely been active in different ways and different capacities. People asked, well, what would you run for? Or people asked me specifically to run for mayor. I've done that. I know the job. I can hit the ground running. I have relationships on all sides of the aisle. I work for the governor now in Trenton. Being a Democrat, I'm down there. I have great relationships with both sides of the Democratic Party, which means I have that experience and the resources and the relationships to leverage them here. We were actually fortunate or unfortunate to have to deal with the budget crisis in Orange like many other municipalities. We lost $6.4 million in 1 year, right? So we actually were looking at a 20% tax increase that we had to cut our way through. So we had to reshuffle things, we had to streamline things, we had to cross-train our departments. These are experiences that can be leveraged, in the mayoral capacity, and not so much as council. It's funny, I went to a church service once, Reverend Ron Christian's church in Irvington. He is a West Orange resident, or was last time I spoke to him. And he had, Reverend Al Sharpton speaking. He had an interesting speech, interesting ministry, and he said, he'll fly anywhere all over the world whenever somebody wants to have him speak. He'll fly in storms, hurricanes, everything else, but he won't fly with somebody that has never flown through a storm before. Okay, because he said he wants experience. He wants somebody that's been through some things and knows how to do the job. And I think that's something that, if I were to run here, and it's something that you guys can get behind, that experience, that relevant experience from having to deal with tough budget crunches, with losses in state funding, with the other things that we were able to create or manifest through, or vis-a-vis outside funding, the $100 million in outside funding we were able to bring in, we were able to do a lot of things that did not come out of the taxpayer's pocket that we wouldn't have been able to afford, that perhaps you guys can't afford. And we would look to replicate some of those things here in town where it works, depending on the needs of the community in each respective section.
My name Jerry Roberts, West Orange resident for about 10 years now.
Speak up, please. Yes, can you give him the microphone?
I'll just stand up. I'll just stand up. My name is Jerry Roberts. I'm a West Orange resident for about 10 years. My question is simply one of residents. You described earlier in your introduction that you purchased a home in Orange. What is exactly your residency status now? And if you wanted to run for any office in West Orange, what are you planning to do about it?
Okay, well, the residency requirement for office, as I understand it, is 1 year of residency prior to assuming office. I moved back into West Orange in 2012, and I currently reside in Crystal Woods, which is right around the corner from here. You just go right down Eagle Rock Avenue, make a left on Blackburn Terrace, it dumps out into Clark and Drive, and where I live is a hop, skip, and a jump away. Does that answer your question?
It does. Now, part two.
Part two.
Part two.
I like part two.
Yeah. After having lived in West Orange for so long, did you consider before running for office, when you thought about running for office in Orange, did you think about the fact that maybe West Orange might be a better place to serve?
To me, it's not a matter of a better place to serve. It's more of a matter of where God leads you in life. I did not plan to go to Orange. As I indicated, that was Mom's fault because she started charging me rent, and that's where we ended up. I was actually very young at the time. And I was not that brazen to think that I would go out and run for mayor and take over the city and do all these things. So I wanted to actually run for council and was positioning myself to do that because that seemed to make sense. But I ended up running for mayor again, as I said, because the mayor got himself in a little bit of legal trouble and it worked out and we did a lot of things. Now I'm back here and residents have asked, please consider this. Let's see if this makes sense. Can we try to get you to run? And I'm open to it, but that's for people like you to tell me if that's something that makes sense for you. So I would not run for council. That's just not something that excites me, and I don't think it really maximizes the expertise that I've kind of obtained over the years. I was the chairman of the Management Reform Committee for the entire state of New Jersey's league of municipalities, which meant it was my responsibility to bring mayors together, galvanize them, bring them down the track, and then testify before Senate and Assembly hearings to make adjustments to, or lobby for adjustments to pension and health care reform to get taxes under control. A lot of people didn't realize that police and fire, for example, were about 77% of our operating budget, and pension and health care was going up about 14 or 12% respectively, but everybody knows we have a 2% cap. So how do you fund that when you can't raise taxes 2% and you can't get the concessions to make up the difference? So we went down to Trenton to try to fight for rule changes so that we could more efficiently deliver services without breaking the backs of the taxpayers. Those type of experiences really are only leveraged in the position of mayor because you don't have the access or the ability to move the pieces from the city council.
I'm Greg Bullock. I'm a 30-year...
Stand up, please, because some of us are hard of hearing.
We can't hear the question.
I speak loud. Can you hear me?
No, could you please stand up, please? So we can see your face. Stand up, please.
You see, sir, when there's an important man in the building, we want everybody to see him.
Okay, well, Eldridge, even if you couldn't hear it.
All right, I'm Greg Bullock. I'm a 30-year resident of West Orange. And I remember you from a very young man. And followed your career in Orange. And thought you did an incredible job over there, and did some good things, some of which are listed in your handout. But my point is that you got into Orange, and then you got involved, and you started out to run for council, and then something happened, and you wound up running for mayor.
Yes.
Okay? I don't have to tell you that Orange and West Orange are two very, very different towns.
Absolutely.
And with that in mind, what makes sense, and you're just having a discussion with Jerry Roberts, what makes sense to me is for you to establish a track record in West Orange before you attempt to run for mayor.
Okay.
And that vehicle, in my mind, is council. I think that's the wisest move, but you're here to hear a lot of opinions of people. I think that's the move for you. I think a jump into the mayor's race in West Orange is not advisable until you establish a track record in West Orange that stands on its own.
Okay, and I can appreciate that, and that's part of what these meetings are for, to get those types of opinions. And I think a track record is relative. When you're talking about the chief executive officer of any company, and let's remember that a town is a municipal corporation. You want somebody with experience. You wouldn't necessarily say to, the CEO of Microsoft that wants to move over to, the CEO of, I don't know, Google. We want you to have experience here before we bring you over. If it's the same general field where you have experience and you understand the relationships of that particular industry, those skills are transferable. And you're right, the town is different from Orange, very much so. This is a suburban community. But we must also realize that the bottom of the hill is changing, right? The demographics of West Orange is changing. And I think that we need, it has changed. It has changed. So we need somebody that understands the best of both worlds, if you want to put it that way. I had the benefit of working in Orange, dealing with tough times, right? Homicides, violent crime, right? Loss of funding, over and over again. But I've also was born and raised here and understand what West Orange looked like 20 and 30 years ago and was a part of those programs. So while I appreciate your position, I would submit that those skills are transferable and that my track record speaks for itself over there and that those skills are relatable over here. And being a part of the fabric of the community, again, growing up here, going to schools here, that I think that those are things that potentially could make a big difference here, especially with the right support. And I don't say look at me as if I'm going to do it all. Because one thing I learned is that you have to surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, right? So when you're looking at me, look at me from the lens of this is somebody that has relationships, that knows how to do it or drive these things through, but understand that I'm going to find the right people to surround myself with, my directors, people like Valerie that helped us move the business forward, stakeholders like yourselves that can help shape policy, right? It's not really for me to sit here and tell you everything that I want to do in the town, but more so to get a sense from you what you would like to see, because you all help shape what the face of West Orange looks like and the direction that you want it to go. Any other questions?
Howard Hall, I'm a resident since about 2000.
Thank you for standing up.
What do you see as the most critical issue for West Orange? And whatever that is, how would you go forward to address it?
The most critical issue I see in West Orange, again, as someone who has grown up here and actually been on the other side of the fence in Orange and that is back here now, is redevelopment. And why do I say that? Because we could create a laundry list of 101 things that we would like to see happen in West Orange. It all costs money, right? A politician could sit up here and tell you, I'm going to do this for the kids and I'm going to do that for the kids, but how are you going to fund it? Where is the money going to come from? Are you going to raise taxes? Are you going to cut this program to support another program? So for me, it's redevelopment. Why? Because that's how you broaden your tax base. That's how you get in additional ratables to fund different programs. Now, what that is subject to the needs of the community, the wants of the community, the master plan, whether you have a market rate type project or a workforce housing project or a combination of residential and commercial, where you have more businesses coming in that don't overburden the school system with additional kids. Redevelopment is key. We have that failed project that's sitting there right now on Main Street. I think it's been that way for at least 6 years. I was talking to somebody about it. I said, the hole in the ground, you mean the thing that's growing trees now? And I said, yeah, I guess that's what it is. And then you have the valley. There's a couple of abandoned factories down there. This stuff impacts every single thing in your community, not just financial resources, right? There's something called crime fighting by environmental design, which means it's not just about locking people up to stop crime, but how do you change your environment to deter crime? Whether that's something as simple as putting lights so that the street in the area is well lit, right? Whether it is creating housing or business districts that are more create a lesser likelihood that crime will happen in that particular area. Those are things that we did in Orange. Those are things that we can do here. And I think that is absolutely important that we focus on that redevelopment to get the funding, right? To create an impact or to make a dent on the crime or to keep it from getting worse. And also to continue looking at alternative revenue streams so that we can fund different projects and different programs within the township.
Nancy Warshowski, I'm a resident of West Orange since 1984. And one of my questions is, taxes are so high here. How can they be reduced? I know you mentioned ratables and all that. And where is the money going?
Okay. For exactly where the money is going, only God knows that, and the mayor that's sitting in the chair right now. But I can tell you that reducing taxes, while to run a campaign saying that might surely get one elected, I'm not going to tell you that. I've never been that type of person that's going to tell you what you want to hear. I give it straight with no chaser, as they say. And it's not necessarily realistic to expect that anybody is going to be able to reduce your taxes. Okay, why is that? Let's look at the nature of government. We have municipalities that operate with about 75% of their budgets or operating budgets coming from police and fire related expenses. Just them, they're under contract most of the time. Their salaries go up every year. The cost of gas goes up every year. The cost of pensions and health care goes up every year. So it's not realistic in my view, based on my experience, to sit here and lie to you and tell you that I or anybody else is going to be able to reduce your taxes. Can we level them? Can we slow the increase? Can we do different things to bring alternative streams of funding to maybe disperse, if you will, that tax burden throughout the community a little bit better? Sure. But I'm not going to tell you that I can reduce your taxes because I've been there and I don't think that's realistic. Any other questions? Surely there's one. She's been giving me the eye all night. I think that's something to say. Just stand up so they can look at you. Just let them see who's sitting at the front table. Go ahead.
I actually have a question.
I knew it.
We can't hear you.
If you look at West Orange and Orange, where is the comparability in terms of scope, in terms of specific areas, and how do you see those things as having some common base so that whatever efforts were made in Orange, if those kinds of comparable efforts are made in this community, is it a one-to-one?
Okay. The towns are not.
Can you repeat the question?
Her question in essence was, where is the commonality between the two municipalities? I think whatever community you're in, if you're trying to grow it and make it be successful, people look for safe communities, they look for communities that are affordable, they look for communities with good education. So those three centralized themes are common between the two. As it relates to the specific makeup of the communities, while I refer to Orange as urban, the reality is that it's actually part suburban. Some of you may know about the Seven Oaks section of town, where you have houses that have several acres, that have pools, right? So there is a suburban component to the city of Orange. So it was a dynamic town, and actually that required some very creative governance because the reality was Orange is about 75% renter-based, right? But you have a lot of landowners in Seven Oaks with large properties, right? But then you have a lot of multifamily houses. So there definitely is some commonality in that respect, where we have a suburban community here with more renters coming in different multifamily homes in different sections of town. So that is something that is very similar. Again, crime is the issue, and then there's actually, leaving back up, there's a couple projects that are pending right now that I have intimate knowledge about because we're working on them on the Orange side of the line that are joint projects with West Orange. Some of you may not have known that this Arts District concept was one that was fused between West Orange and Orange. It was designed to create a seamless transition between the two towns so that you could not tell where one started and stopped. I referred to Hat City Kitchen, which is on the Orange side of the line earlier, but many of you may or may not know that Luna Stage is on the West Orange side of the line. Right? So working together, the two municipalities are able to create this walkable district, for the arts, and we want to keep growing that. Some of you may or may not know that on Central Avenue there's something called the Harvard Printing Press. It's an abandoned factory. Half of it is on the West Orange side, half of it is on the Orange side. We had talks with West Orange administration at the time and the developers on how to move that project forward so it would look the same on the Orange side as it does on the West Orange side. So there's a lot of commonality, not just in the priorities of the municipality or the makeup being suburban and urban, but actually some specific projects that were on the drawing board that still need to move forward in order to make a dent and a difference in the valley or other sections of town and slow the crime and everything else from moving further up the hill or further west. Good.
You talk about the commonality of West Orange and Orange. I understand that as far as the Arts District and that area. But you know all too well because you grew up here. West Orange is suburban in the sense that it's several little neighborhoods loosely tied together by a lot of distance. And and with a very anemic downtown central visit. Okay?
Are you telling me that you're not
And that's
satisfied
true.
with the way it is now?
Very anemic, okay, as opposed to Montclair or South Orange, so you know what I'm talking about.
And Orange.
Okay, and that's just the way it is, and probably won't change anytime soon. But what my point is how do you, or what's your strategy if you decide to run for mayor for gaining the buy-in from enough people in West Orange, which, like I said, is a very different town than Orange. Enough buy-in, okay, to support your candidacy here without having prior established a track. I know you have good ideas that you're articulating now, but I'm talking about a strategy to gain support.
Well, you know, I think the strategy to gain support is something that every elected official goes through in every community, and typically you'd like to think they do it the same way, which is going to the people they would like to represent or considering representing and getting their sense on things, you know, seeing where they feel on the issues, having meet and greets like this throughout the town. Like I said, I haven't announced for office, and I wouldn't just go out on a limb and do that without speaking to residents. You have to get a sense of what they feel, what you feel, see where you fall on the issues, and then we can decide how to move forward. I think that if, like in any community, if you can get to the right people, right, that have access to different folks. I didn't know all of you before you came in here. Somebody invited you, right? People you know people that you don't know. And I think that just moving throughout the community and reacquainting myself with old friends, meeting some new ones, that hopefully if these ideas make sense and hearing some more of your input as that continues to shape, you know, what I would like to do, because it's not all about what I want. It's about what you want. So as you guys tell me different things that you'd like to see in the community and which direction you'd like to go, that will continue to shape those ideas, and you know, we'll see where it goes in the future.
You've explained very clearly a lot of why you should consider it, and it sounds like you may have given it some serious thought. Could you talk a little bit, though, about some of the challenges? What do you see as being the biggest obstacles to making a decision?
Well, you know, again, obstacles for running for political office really hinge on support. Do you have the support to run? And that's really not my call. That's for the residents to decide. You know, there's a lot of challenges that I think the city will face, especially when we talk about new directions that we might want to move within the municipality. I've heard people say that they don't like what's going to end up being down on Main Street right now if the project moves forward. But we have to recognize that the township, for better or for worse right now, has entered into certain agreements. They've gone in through planning board, zoning board approvals, and there's certain things that are kind of etched in stone, if you will, that necessarily can't be changed unless these individuals default in some way that would give you cause to reverse or undo some of those agreements. So I think as it relates to the township, I think that might be something that is a challenge. Figuring out how to move forward to get that positive change without violating rules, regulations, or pre-existing conditions that may be sitting here presently. Go ahead, Melanie.
I just wanted to say one thing related to the track record. Even though I don't live in West Orange, I live in the Orange, on the border of Orange and South Orange. But I do want to say something about the track record issue. The track record issue is that Eldridge has been mayor of a town of about 30,000 people. It is urban and suburban, as he articulated. The basics of the job are the same. You manage budgets, you manage taxes, you're concerned about police and fire and safety. Those are the things that everyone's concerned about. As a resident in Orange, when he ran, I was concerned about taxes. That's my primary concern when I'm paying high taxes and they continue to escalate. And so some of those issues are common. So from a track record, he's been a chief administrative officer, he's managed budgets successfully, he's managed the tax issues successfully in Orange, even though the towns are different. He talks about me as being director of planning for Orange. Now I'm director of planning for East Orange. I would say that the towns are very different, but I bring the same track record and experience to East Orange that I brought to Orange. So to me, to run for council is a very different job. It's about legislation and appropriation. Being mayor is about being a good administrator and good manager of a town and meeting the needs of the people. That's it.
Right there, sir.
Good evening, my name is Charles Williams, and just for everybody in the room, Eldridge Hawkins was a good mayor in Orange. He did a good job. He fell on the sword as it relates to pension and health. He stood up for the residents, not only from Orange, but he stood up for the residents of the state of New Jersey with that bill, because that bill affected a lot of public workers. So, but he stood up, and he did his job. And we always be grateful for that.
Thank you.
I just have one thing that I think you should need to clear up, especially if you want to run the mayor in this town. Please talk about the lawsuit when you were a police officer, and how it affected the town or didn't affect the town, and what the outcome of that lawsuit was.
I was waiting for that question to come up. I was wondering how long I had to stall with more questions before we got to the good stuff. Yes, in 2004, I was hired as a police officer here in West Orange, as a full-time regular police officer. And some of you may or may not know that the municipality is a civil service town, which means you're hired based on your position on a list. The essence of it is the person that scores higher is supposed to get hired first, with a narrow exception. Any municipality of civil service has the ability to select any of the 3 top candidates on that list. Okay, so if you were number 2, they could pick you and skip number 1, but they can't go from 1 to 4, if that makes sense. What happened was, in my case, in 2007, I was made aware that an individual who scored worse than me, right, was actually let me back up. Not only did he score worse than me, he started the same day as I did, but was getting a higher salary and a different pay increase. Now, in West Orange specifically, if you're hired on July 12th of a given year, you get your raise. If you're hired before July 12th, you get your raise in January, 6 months later. If you're hired July 12th or after, you have to wait a full year and a half, which also gives you additional seniority, depending on when you were hired for promotions, etc. So that was brought to my attention. I brought it to union like any union member would. PBA President Jasic, at the time, and he's still the PBA president, went and researched it. And he said, Hawk, that's what they call him. He said, Hawk, I think, you think you're right. We think there's something wrong here. And the union went through their normal motions and they filed a grievance on my behalf. They supported me. They felt that there was something wrong there. The NAACP actually also filed a resolution of support where they were going to join in on the lawsuit because there were some racial things going on there where one of the sergeants in charge of hiring was using the N-word and some other things. So it was a very messy thing, and parts of it are still ongoing. And, I'm not really looking to plead my case and convince you that I'm right or wrong or what have you, because that's what court's for. But the essence of it is that at the core, there was something that was perceived not correct, and I stood up for my rights in that regard. And I'm not the only one that thought it was not correct, because the PBA and the NAACP stood with me. And that evolved into different things that some might perceive as retaliation and everything else. And I don't mind telling you some of the details. This administration, and this is something that I would actually fight to change if I was here, is that we have proper hiring practices that don't cost taxpayers money in unnecessary lawsuits. Because they had some type of brain trust here in West Orange that was thinking of creative things. And I'll give you one specific example. And this is all verifiable by hard documents, so this isn't my opinion. I applied for disability pension at one point, and that ended up severing my employment with the Township of West Orange. Several months later, right, this is well into my mayor's term, several months later, 6 to 8 months later, the Township of West Orange decided they wanted to retroactively terminate me back to July 1 of 2008, which doesn't even make any sense. How do you erase 3 years of police history? Do you just let out of jail everybody I locked up? It just didn't make sense. And these things are verifiable, right? These are public records. And civil servant, and I think they did it to jam up my retirement, right? Because my retirement was set to be approved, but the pension board says, oh, Eldridge Hawkins, we can't approve your pension today because we just got retroactive charges erasing your tenure 3 years ago. And to be honest, now we're not sure if you were really a police officer when you were in the police vehicle that you had a car crash in. So I said, well, if that's the case, why don't you charge me for impersonating a police officer, because I should have never been in the police car. It didn't make any sense, but this is the illogical nature of these cases, and it gets very confusing and aggravating, but the essence of it is these are cold hard facts, right? The retroactive termination occurred. My father appealed it. And the state AOL judge and the Civil Service Commission reversed it and said that West Orange had no authority whatsoever to retroactively terminate you for anything. And consequently, my retirement went through, and I've now been approved, and I'm a retired police officer. So it just goes to speak, it speaks to the lengths that this administration will go through to step on the neck of people when they actually stand up and say you did something wrong. You know, thank God I had a father who was an attorney, because if I was the average person that had a family, I don't have kids that I know of yet, so, but if I had kids and a family in that sense, and I was forced into a position where I had to figure out how I was going to keep a roof over my family's head and fight for this thing without income and everything else, I'd have been stuck. It was only because I had a father who was able to fight for this thing that we were able to actually eventually win. Because if they would do it to me, then they would do it to anybody else. And I guarantee you there's several other lawsuits pending against West Orange right now for improper hiring or wrong demotions or other things that can cost the residents money. So, you know, win, lose, or draw, you know, there's several components. They may go on. That's what a court of law is for. I'm not here to convince you I was right or wrong. You can make your own opinion. My thing is simply to state that, as far as I'm concerned, those actions were grounded out of something tangible, and the PBA and the NAACP agreed with me in that regard, and wherever the cases go, they go. Is that a fair response?
Thank you.
Okay.
Eldridge, earlier you stated, and I agree with you, that redevelopment and ratables are the #1 issue on a long list of issues. Now, as we look at ratables and redevelopment, we talked a lot about Main Street, but we have empty retail space in Essex Green. We have some empty lots along Pleasant Valley Way. We have a number of places where there was retail, where there is no more. Macy's will be gone, it's either in 2 years to 5 years, I forget which, but their lease is up and there's no current plan to replace, while it is a small Macy's, to replace an anchor store. Okay. And while homes do contribute to ratables, we have lots of homes for sale, and we have some empty homes owned by the banks. So bringing in, building new homes, not necessarily the move. What is your plan to address retail development and service business development that would represent real ratables for West Orange?
Well, you know, I actually prefer, in a perfect world, that we have a nice blend or a nice mix of that retail or commercial redevelopment in any town. Like you're absolutely right. You can get ratables from a variety of redevelopment, right? Because everybody pays taxes that owns property, whether you're a corporation or a homeowner. But the businesses don't bring kids with them that also overburden our school system. So I agree with you that that's certainly a priority. And one of the things that we have to do are create relationships, right? And we have to put the township on the map. You know, I heard you say it a couple times, best practices, right? What are other townships doing that makes this process work for them? You know, what worked in Orange that could work over here? What could work in other municipalities that could work here? You look at that, and then you figure out how to move the towns forward. There's a variety of business programs. The state has the Business Action Center. That's right down the hall from where I presently work. There's a variety of other programs that you can utilize to help recruit businesses. The key is to let businesses know that they can make money here, right? We don't like to talk about it, but money makes the world go around, right? If a business believes that they can make money and be profitable in your township, then they will come. Not to do me a favor, not to do you a favor, but so that they can make money. So the trick is to let them know that this is an environment that's conducive to profitability for them. Now, whether that's a developer or somebody else, letting them know that they're not going to purchase a piece of property and be tied up in the planning board or zoning board for 2 years waiting for approvals because that costs money. Letting them know that this is a business-friendly environment. Whether that's UEZ zones, whether that's a special improvement district, any type of business programs that you can look at that the state has, the county has, that you can tell these business owners, hey, we're business-friendly, we want you here, you know, we'll do what we need to do to help you be profitable, and to also show them that there's a business here. How do you do that? In the city of Orange, we had a demographic study done to show where the leakage was in our community, right? So we'd have to examine through study, okay, what is the leakage, meaning where is the money going or leaking out of West Orange, right? What are residents like you, residents like I, going out of the town to buy, right? What are you going to the Short Hills Mall for, the Livingston Mall for, the Willowbrook Mall, that you'd rather go to Essex Green for? Where is that money going? How much money is that? Quantifying it and helping to market and sell our township to those businesses that would consider moving here.
Relationships are very important in a town. Relationships with the community, the taxpayer, most importantly, police and fire department. I'm glad you touched about the lawsuit. But how can you convince me, the taxpayer, that this isn't about retaliation with police officers? And where do the police officers stand with maybe thinking of you running for this position?
Well, there is no retaliation with police officers because, as I indicated, the union stood with me and filed a grievance on my behalf. Actually, they did it a couple times when the township started doing things that they shouldn't have done. I worked with these guys. Most of them, I imagine, would say positive things with me, about me, or neutral things at best. So there's no bad blood between I and the line officers. I don't even, quite frankly, to be honest, I don't even blame the officer that got higher pay than me for getting higher pay. Because as far as I'm concerned, he's supposed to try and get the most money he can for himself. It was the administration's job to make sure that they hired him in accordance with the rules and regulations, right? So I don't blame the line officers for any thing that happened with litigation or anything else. I lay the blame squarely on the people that made the decisions.
I'm just thinking because I know this is going to be in the back of a lot of people's mind, about what's going on.
But I maintain a good relationship with the officers here. I text message Chris Jasic on occasion. He's the PBA president. I still talk to several of the officers here. So there's no bad blood at all between the officers and myself. And I would respectfully suggest that if you're curious, ask them. They're available. They're around. Ask them what they feel about me and